So now as a human being, I'm in a place where I got all this sour in my life, but I can actually start from understanding that in the midst of with as sour as it is, as much pain as there is, as defensive, as arrogant as I am, whatever, I am completely and totally loved, accepted, forgiven, on the path of with a God who wants to restore, who wants to heal, who wants to walk me into that, and to stop at that place and go, okay, I got to get real clear on what that is so I can start moving into this and bringing sweetness to it.
Created on purpose and for purpose.
Hey, welcome back to the Daron Really Wine podcast. Excited to have you here. And listen, we're about to change to another camera angle. And when you see the next camera angle, you're going to see we got a full house today. Welcome, PJ and Julie, to the podcast. Let me see. Oh, applause. I got my buttons back.
You're welcome.
I got my buttons back. Yeah. Crowd is going wild in the background. Hey, we are into the second part of the relationship series. And I thought, you know what? When we're talking about this next level of relationships with other people, it could be good to actually have some people where we have relationships with each other, different perspectives. And so excited for you guys to be back, Julie, to be back again. Mm-hmm. I mean, for you faithful podcast listeners, I know that you were wondering what was the over-under on Julie coming back on. But I would say that the feedback was positive. It warmed your heart to come back to the podcast, would you say, dear?
Yes. It warmed my heart to come back to the podcast.
So good to hear.
Well, and didn't we hear something about like they were the most streamed podcasts that have happened since she was on?
They may have broken some records, PJ.
I think we saw some emails that were like, hey, we should make this the Julie Early Wine podcast instead of the Darren.
Where's the edit button for that?
My one request is if you're watching right now, you will turn your audio up and actually put your phone down and not watch. Just listen. It's the knowledge is the value, not the appearance, please.
So you know me, you know Julie. You don't know PJ yet. PJ, you are you do all things at Blackbird. You take care of all of our what's the word? Email marketing, all that stuff. Yep. But you've now kind of worked into the role to be basically our project manager, which everything has been running amazingly smooth since you took over that ability.
That's good to know.
So we love you on the Blackbird Mission team. But go ahead and just give a quick intro, who you are, what you do, so people can know who's in the mix this week.
Well, that's a tough one. I wasn't prepared for that. So no,
he
didn't really give me that. He told me what question.
I mean, introduce yourself. How hard is that?
It's pretty hard, actually. My name's PJ. I'm Indianapolis native. I grew up in Noblesville, so I've been around a long time. I spent almost 20 years working in churches and creative ministries, worship ministry, all that kind of stuff. Still lead worship on the side. But then a handful of years ago, we really felt like God was calling us into a new stage of life and pursuing a creative business that, help people with marketing and telling their story. And Blackbird, Daron, you and I have known each other on and off for a long time. And so Blackbird came around, and it's been a really great fit because it's working with people that I know and love and get to do fun things with and make jokes about and talk about relationships and be creative. I mean, what's wrong with any of that?
Love it. I love all of it. So the cool part is, Julie and I have been married for almost 23 years now. Right. You've been married to your wife, Angie, for...
We just passed 20.
Just past 20.
Yeah.
It will be 23 because it's 2024. We got married in 2001. Oh, so you take 1 year off of it. So you're welcome.
It's called math.
It is math. And I'm a stud at it.
Have you noticed that people are talking about math as maths with a plural, like S, lately?
No.
I'm hearing that everywhere. I don't know.
Because you can have calculus or trigonometry or geometry. There are multiple maths.
It's the maths.
No.
Yeah, I've been hearing it all over the place.
I don't care if it's plural or singular. I think it all sucks. So, anyway.
Mom, if you're listening, he doesn't really mean that.
Is your mom a math teacher?
She is a math teacher.
Oh, okay.
So.
Special grace for her.
And our son excels at it. He probably thinks that he's ridiculous.
Hey, we spent 3 weeks. Daron Cooper was on the podcast for the first segment of this series called Relationships. We're talking about relationship up with God. And it was important that we started there because as we're going to talk about relationships with other people in this series, we're going to do 3 episodes together. We have to have that be the foundation. And that's a good foundation, right? And Jesus is clear on that. Jesus is asked in Matthew chapter 22, what the number one greatest commandment is. And I love the first part, verse 37, right? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And I think it would be great if we could get in and do like a little Bible editing, if we would have just if we just had verse 37 and 38, right? Just stop. Like love, here's the command, just love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor, and then just
Period,
stop.
full stop.
Full
We're
stop.
No
ready to
neighbors
go.
necessary.
No, what it would be, just think how much easier life
if
would
that
be.
made life great. Right. I follow that.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
hey, just love me. Sweet, because you're perfect and consistent and you have great character and you are gracious and all the things that you are. The problem is, not the problem, the opportunity. The opportunity is he goes on in verse 39 and 40 and says this, and the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. And then Jesus goes even more aggressive in John chapter 13, where he says this one, a new command I give you, love one another as I have loved you. So you must love one another. And then he hits us with these two words in verse 35, which really up the ante for this podcast. By this, everyone will know that you're my disciples if you love one another. This understanding, right, that, and we say it all the time on the podcast, I've stolen the phrase from Gary Smalley, but life is relationships. Everything else is just the details. Relationships is my word of the year. And as I'm digging into it, there's no getting around this element. You know, we're loved by God, we love him, but the thing that is going to differentiate our life, people go, hey, that guy, that girl, they follow Jesus, is how they love other people.
Right.
And in my 46 years of experimentation with this, that's not easy at all.
Well, and that's what makes Jesus great, right? Like he takes all the laws and all of the prophets and brings them down to two things. Right. So I've actually been reading in Exodus lately and just read the section on the 10 Commandments. And the first three are all about our relationship with God. Then there's this weird middle one about rest. And then all the rest of them are about relationships. And so to take all 10 of those and the, 606 others, isn't it 616, is that right?
Sure.
Back to the maths?
Yes.
Sure.
That's impressive.
You think about all of those laws, right? And Jesus boils them down to two.
Yeah.
And how great is that? Like, that's all I have to do? Well,
Yeah.
okay, great. I can do this. And if I can figure this out, those are great.
Yeah. Here's another verse. I want you guys to elaborate on this one. Proverbs 27, verse 9 says, sweet friendships refresh the soul and awaken our hearts with joy. For good friends are like the anointing oil that yields the fragrant incense of God's presence. So true. But my first point of this podcast I want us just to talk about is that relationships are sweet and they're sour. Right?
Are we ordering Chinese takeout now?
I wish. I haven't had much to eat today. That sounds phenomenal. So how have you guys experienced that in your life, the sweet and the sour? What's that look like?
It's funny. I like that better when you were just reading the verse because I'm thankful that my initial reaction was, man, I really do have a lot of really sweet relationships in my life. Ones that have, like, I feel very blessed that I have really deep, meaningful relationships. However, if I really step back and think, like, those that are closest to me, it still required, commitment, dedication, honesty, transparency, and those things aren't always easy. And so maybe it's more like, it's not like, sure, I have relationships that have gone sour or have felt sour or have been hurtful, but it was really warming to hear that verse right there because I do have really sweet relationships, but, and maybe the sour part is the but, is that it took time to get there, and it took time to trust and connect and all of those things. And even there were bumps in the road with some of them that mean the most to me. There was still, it wasn't, we maybe had to work through a differing of opinion or a broken trust or a misunderstanding, even when not attempted or not even intended. I mean, not attempted, intended. And so, I do feel so blessed to, be able to take a deep breath and be like, man, I do have some really sweet relationships. But the journey to even be willing to accept those in my own life, I was almost the sour one. They weren't necessarily, I mean, there's been sour things that have happened to me that have felt sour, but I was so internally sour. I think there were seasons in my life I missed really sweet relationships because of that.
It's a good perspective. PJ, what about you, man?
First, I think it's really interesting that, Julie jumped to sweet relationships. guys would never describe relationships as
That's very
sweet,
true.
right? We would say,
my
"Oh yeah, my good buddy," or
That bro, man.
This is my sweet friend PJ.
We rose.
I mean, that's the first thing that comes to mind. Is I would never say I have any sweet relationships, except with my wife. I love her very much.
That's the most important one
you know,
on earth.
that
But
is
there you
really-
go.
But I think it comes down to authenticity, right? So that sour and the sweet part of it. You know, I'm an Enneagram 4, so like everything about me is like, what's the real? Like, let's feel it real deeply. Let's experience it real deeply. Let's get to people's real motivations, their real heart, right? And I want to walk out of a room. Every time I walk out of a room, I want everybody in that room to know where they stand with me. Like that's really important to me. And so you can't get to that without the sweet and the sour. You know, I think about times like people that I trusted so much, and then something happens, the relationship breaks, they cuss me out, which has happened, you know, all those different things. And then when I step back and I look at it and I realize there's something else going on in their lives that I might just be a lightning rod for right now. So how can I help them get through it, right? And and I'm not perfect at it. I'm not good at it all the time, but I think you have to have both sweet and sour moments to really be able to develop through and get to that real authentic lifestyle.
Yeah.
It's true.
Well, I like what you guys both brought in, the understanding that sometimes the sour, you realize you've added some ingredients to that.
Yeah.
And you know, I think that's one of the tricky things when Jesus says, hey, you got to love your neighbor as you love yourself. And realizing that so many, I think, of the souring ingredients that we bring to relationships, it's actually usually unconscious, but it has roots in misconceptions or struggles that we have with ourself, right? Which it's like, I don't want to feel inadequate or inferior or insecure or whatever. So I'm going to hide behind that and find your problems and sour this relationship because this feels too vulnerable, right? So what I want to do is just kind of to put together some things that we can kind of riff on here is what I'm calling 4 illusions or misunderstandings that sour relationships, which then I think contribute to what are the 5 core barriers to building relationships. Okay, and then we're going to unpack a little bit more. But here are the 4 illusions or misunderstandings that I think sour relationships. I think it comes down to this: we have misillusions, we have illusions and misunderstandings about God, about ourselves, about others, and about our work. And here's the connection I have with this, right? Is I think misunderstandings or illusions about who God is, I think sours the water in relationships a ton, and especially of our view of ourselves, right? That's one of the reasons for the first 3 weeks we said, let's talk about our relationship with God, because this has to be aligned. This has to be based on fact, right? Especially when Jesus is saying, hey, love people the way I've loved you. Well, if we have a misunderstanding or an illusion of how God's love interacts in our life, we're not going to be able to extend that to others, okay? The other one is ourselves. And I think it's key in this that we have to see ourselves through God's eyes.
Which is so hard.
So hard.
So hard.
So hard.
Yeah. I think that's a lifelong, continual growth pursuit.
Yeah.
And I think, at least in my life, as I've matured in my understanding of who I am in God's sight, the security, the grace, the comfort, the relationship, right? The camaraderie, fill in all those relational words that I have with God and the security I have, it has freed me to show up in a more loving, peaceful, gentle, forgiving way in my relationships. But if that's a massive misunderstanding or you don't know it, you're going to sour every relationship that you get into, which is a difficult thing. The other thing, I think one of the other illusions we have is other people. We misunderstand other people. And I think one of the biggest ways we do this, and we can pull this theme through if it hits with you guys, is through comparison and competition.
Yeah, the comparison trap.
Yeah. Where other people aren't people for me to love, to serve, to see, to know. We're going to talk about that. These are people that I'm competing against. And then you stack it up. I'm competing with them because I have a misunderstanding of my own value and worth, where I have to be better in whatever it is, to be better than them, to feel like I have value, because I have to have value for God to love me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So these layers, as they go up or down, if they're misaligned, if they're misunderstood, they just throw things out. And then I think another part that begins to sour relationships is how we interact with our work, is when it becomes our source of security, our source of identity, our source of purpose, our God even. We've got basically 100% sour ingredients. Yeah. And then we wonder why our relationships are a massive struggle. Of those, so God, others, God, ourself, others, in our work. For you guys, this wasn't on this is a brand new question. I just came up with it, so you haven't even prepared. Of those, what pops out at you that you would say, man, I think I've grown the most of taking that from an illusion to a reality? God, yourself, others, or your work? Julie, ladies first.
Give me the 4 options one more time.
God, yourself, others, or your work?
I think for me, yourself and others are sort of one and the same. I think I am somewhere around an Enneagram 6 or an Enneagram 1. Still trying to figure it all out. But the core part of me is so immensely loyal to me that to others, I'm so loyal that I'm very easily let down by if someone does not appear loyal. And I've had to learn that not everyone operates, and it's not actually a direct reaction back to me if they're not operating the way that I need them to operate. It just may not be natural to them, or it may not be who they are created to be, their unique description that they are. And I've also had to learn a lot about giving grace, because I think I was raised to have extremely high expectations over people, and then realizing I don't know I may not know what everyone's going through around me. Right. So I think for me, I've had to take my own step back and be like, okay, first of all, every relationship in your life can't meet all of your needs. Only Christ can. And that's a really difficult thing, because it's not in front of you. It's not tangible. You don't feel it. You don't sometimes you don't feel the same form of reciprocation you do from another person. And then on the flip side, I've had to learn to give others grace, because I can be easily offendable, and I can be easily irritated, I've learned, by reactions and responses of people, and then I will push them away. And that's actually not at all the way God wants me to be. He's saying, he keeps reminding me, just meet them where they are. Just because you don't agree with them, or just because the way they responded isn't the way you'd respond. So I think for me, I have a lot of I feel like the other and myself are so intertwined, because so much of it comes back to my choice to react, how I choose to respond and react either way. That's kind of sort of where I'm at right now.
PJ?
Do we need to turn this into a marriage thing? Anything you want to unpack from that, Daron? How does that feel for you?
Thoughts,
I'm sure I'm going to hear about this later. Do you remember when you said that thing about responding?
Yeah. I'm just glad that we're speaking truth here on the podcast.
Right. That's what it's about.
I'm not talking about in my marriage. That I handle perfectly.
She means that.
Well done.
And I mean
well done. So you're an Enneagram 1. That's what we're discovering right now.
Yes, right. Here we go. See, we're not sure.
That's funny. I really like what you said, though, about meeting people where they are. I feel like that's something that I've always kind of done. And I think that's something that even before I knew it was called Blackbird, right? I knew about pub theology, and I as we've known each other on and off, I've known the things you've done to go out into people's lives, and get into the real places and spaces, right? And that's always something that's really been fascinating to me, because so many people don't want that, right? They want to come to my church, come into my living room, come into my space where I'm comfortable, and then they want people to get vulnerable and real, right? But that makes it harder on them. And for us to take that first step, I think that's that loving your neighbor piece, right? And so I love that. There's some affirmation for you.
Thanks, CJ.
I think I was really just stalling so I could figure out how to answer your question to me.
Good, yeah.
I think, though, for me, I think the hardest is work and self. And, there's this primal thing in men that goes all the way back to the garden. That, Adam was put in the garden to tend it and name the animals and do the work.
Yeah.
And there's that primal thing that men feel to achieve, not necessarily financially or all those different things that we get caught up in, but men are made to work,
Yeah.
right? And I think women are made to work together with men, not in like a sexist chauvinist kind of thing, right? Like,
Right.
I mean, it's helpers, it's co-laboring together, right? In all of life. But for me, it's real easy to put what I do as like to let that start to lean into my identity.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, when I came out of working in the church world, I just assumed I would retire from the church that I was at the time. Right. Great church, great people, things were going well. And it was like a lightning bolt when all of a sudden I felt like God was like, no, you've got to quit your job and you've got to go do this other thing. And I'm not going to tell you what all those things are yet. And like, I'm like, what does that do? Who am I then? Goodness, that was in 2018. It's 2024. I'm 6 years later and I'm still trying to figure all that stuff out. Right. And I think that's a lifelong thing too. But then it puts me into the myself category of struggling with that because of that imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
You know, like building a business, building a ministry, building relationships. Like, am I really this person? Or am I faking it to make it? Which is a Mother Teresa quote, by the way.
Thank you for that.
You're very welcome. But there's, I mean, in all jokes aside, like there's a Mother Teresa thing where she's at the point in her ministry. I mean, we all know Mother Teresa and everything she did in Calcutta, right? With all the orphans, and she's struggling. She doesn't want to do it. She's not feeling it. Like she's feeling the imposter syndrome thing, and goes to her bishop and says, what do I do with this? And basically he said, you keep doing the work and then God will show up. And in that whole process, like that fake it till you make it can really lead to the imposter syndrome unless you're doing it for the right reasons, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, I would say, to recap my very verbose answer, I would say work and myself are real tough to work through sometimes.
Here's what's jumping out to me in both your answers. And it's coming back. I hadn't thought about this until you shared the thing about the 10 Commandments being split and rest being in the middle. Everything that you just unpacked, Joel, is like the reality of like, you're a really loyal person. Some of that loyalty is actually found in pain of disloyalty.
Oh, yeah.
In your youth. So you felt pain and you went, I'm going to show up loyal because I don't want anybody to have that pain.
Yeah.
But what's still down in the foundation? Some personal pain.
Yeah.
Right? For you, PJ, like all of that, like for all of us, we're entering into relationships at 100 miles per hour all the time, completely over booked, over debt, you know, everything's 1,000 miles an hour. And then all these deep intricacies that are coming from pain, they're coming from fear, from, you know, feelings of insignificance or not being enough and all these different things. And then we slam ourselves into relationships with other people and wonder why it doesn't go well.
Right.
And I think that's where God was like, hey, here's what we're at least going to do. Could every 7 days, could you slow down enough to spend some time with me? Let's recalibrate the plumb line.
Right.
Let's let you reflect a little bit and go, what I say this week was a sweet week of relationship or sour. Like, the mix is, you know, it's like, it's a little sour. Okay, God, what misunderstandings and illusion about you, myself, others, my work, help me get straight on this. Because the truth, that plumb line, that's going to set me free. Because I want my relationships, I want to enjoy sweetness and I want to be sweetness, right? To the mix of every relationship I step into. And that's so difficult and so much of it happening unconsciously. I don't think we have a shot without some time to reflect, you know, and get through it. You know, Julie and I joke about loving and hating going to our counselor all the time. And I think it's so funny is that I get so worried of what Holly's going to say to me. I bet she's just going to you know, pin me to the carpet on this one. And then I go to counseling and guess what? Holly asked me questions and then I'm the one pinning myself to the carpet, right? Like, because it's an hour of someone giving you an opportunity to rest, to reflect and go, is that true or is that a lie? And that's the thing I want to pull out is that these illusions, these misunderstandings set us up to 5 core barriers to love. And every one of these barriers are rooted in lies about ourself and about God. And I think that's the amazing thing to see is when Jesus is saying things like, you know, you will know the truth and the truth will set you free. And I think we make that like too much an evangelism thing. Oh, Jesus is true. That's about getting into heaven. And
Well, I mean, yes.
yes, but every single day of your life, in every relationship you're in with God, with yourself, with others, with your job, with all of this, if you're not allowing your life to be guided by what is true, you are going to be buried behind the barriers of this and not be able to see the sweetness of love. So here are these 5 barriers, and let's talk about it real quick, okay? First one, fear. And I think that actually may be all 5. Right? Second one is this, defensiveness. So we're saying I'm building a wall that keeps me isolated from really having sweetness in relationships. So foundational is fear. Usually the mortar or the makeup of that is shame, right? I fear being rejected, right? So fear and shame, defensiveness, ignorance, pride, and pain. And honestly, we could probably do an episode of the podcast just unpacking those.
But before we do that, we need to take a quick commercial break.
You know what, PJ? This is why you have your email marketer that also works with your producer of your podcast that reminds you that you are supposed to take a commercial break.
We need to do that.
We're gonna dig into these barriers and then look at a concept that's been changing my life. It's called the skag concept. That is an acronym. And so you don't go away, because after you get back, we're going to talk about the bears, and then I want to unpack what skag is all about and how it's changing my life and my relationships right after this commercial break. Hey, I got a quote for you. Shared joy is a doubled joy. Shared sorrow is a half sorrow. When I heard that quote, I knew I had lived it. Right? When I was going through the death of my dream, the living part of it, when it was being created, I did it with other people, and it was amazing. It doubled the joy. But when it died and I had to figure out, what do I do with my life? I was so glad to have people walk that journey with me. They really did help half the sorrow. I know you've probably experienced the death of a dream as well. And here's the good news. God wants to resurrect a new purpose in your life, and you can't walk that journey alone. That's why I'm so excited to announce the release of the Death of a Dream small group curriculum. This curriculum is video-based. You're going to get together with a group of people, watch videos where I'm teaching concepts through each chapter, as well as powerful insights that didn't make it in the book. They're going to help you walk together through the process of discovering God's call in your life, seeing God resurrect a sense of purpose and hope. It's going to be amazing. But there's also a great journal that goes along with it. It's going to help you have a process and a guide to observe, reflect, discuss, and open up the insights that are going to lead you into what God wants to do in your future. So listen, here's your quick action steps. And get a group together. Invite some friends to join you, okay? Go to DaronEarlywine.com/the death of a dream. Buy the curriculum, schedule a time, get together, and begin the process of walking together towards the resurrection of your purpose. Once again, it's at DaronEarlywine.com/the death of a dream. Thanks.
Hey, welcome back to the Daron and Earlywine podcast. So glad you're sticking around for the second half of this episode with us.
Me too. The dream chimes, they're back. Love it.
I
You guys want to hear any more sound effects?
I really like the applause. It's real validating.
It's back. Oh, it's good. Crowd's going wild. Guys, sit down. We got to get to the second half of the episode. We appreciate the studio audience.
Will you make sure, though, that the laugh track goes with the next couple jokes I tell? Because, those are important.
Should I have my finger ready for if you say something funny?
Always be ready.
I'm ready.
Okay.
There, I got you.
You missed one.
Oh, dang it. So we're talking about barriers to love. Fear, defensiveness, ignorance, pride, and pain. And those first two... I mean, honestly, they all feed on themselves. And I the more I'm learning about myself, I'm so glad that I'm doing that in concert with God's love and affirmation of me, because you just keep realizing things about yourself. That old quote about, the closer you get to the light, the more dirty you realize you are. And I just getting in and realizing, man, like, I don't realize it, but fear is driving almost every sour thing that I do. Like in our relationship, in our marriage, like I'm a type 7 on the Enneagram. Don't really like painful emotions or emotions really at all, right? And so sometimes it's hard for me to even...
I'm sorry, I'm just laughing at Julie laughing because she's trying not to.
I'm not pushing the button for that one.
That's not supposed to be a joke.
Somebody applaud for me for being married to an Enneagram 7.
I'm trying to be...
He's trying to be realistic.
Being married to an Enneagram 7 is a party.
Anyway, go ahead.
So
I'm so sorry.
You should thank everyone for the joy and excitement that I brought to your life.
You do bring an immense amount of joy and excitement.
Thank you. Anyway, is for me, like realizing, man, yeah, fear is there all of the time. And then when I'm afraid of being rejected, being judged, being whatever the negative thing would be in a relationship, and it's not just with you and I, it's with friends too, right? What's my defense mechanism? Well, I become defensive. I've got to build this wall around myself, right? Then the next one is, ignorance. I mean, you guys have both talked about so often we don't know what's happening in other people's lives. So somebody does something that feels triggering to me, that causes fear, I get defensive. Then I assume I know why they did what they did. I assume their intentions. Then pride kicks in, which I didn't think like that and I didn't respond. So therefore, I'm probably a better person than they are. And then all of this is actually deeply rooted in whatever pain I've had in my whole life. Like the deeper you get into this, you realize, how do we ever think we're just going to figure relationships out? You know what I mean? Like, hey, this is the most important thing you could ever do in your life. And don't really ever read or work on it. Don't go to counseling. Like, don't find a professional and work on it.
It's like that scene in the movie where they're saying, now, whatever you do, they're trying to defuse the bomb, right? Whatever you do, don't clip and the phone goes dead. Like, what am I not supposed to do here? Like, where's the roadmap? Where's the thing?
Yeah. So of those 5, let's get vulnerable here. Okay, it's just us and thousands of people listening, and God. Of those 5, right? Fear, defensiveness, ignorance, pain, and pride. Which one or two do you feel like find yourself bumping up against most often? PJ, will make you start because we made you the go last time.
Ladies first this time. I'm just kidding.
Go ahead, push the button. There you go.
You just let she got the first laugh.
Nailed
track.
that.
was really
well
done.
played.
Okay,
Julie.
I'll give it to her.
Sorry.
For me, it's pain. It's those wounds that you think heal up, but then you scratch it and you pick out the scab a little bit, or you get the scars and you remember it, right? For me, it's definitely the pain piece, that those childhood wounds, the way they play out, right, for everybody are so different. A pastor that I used to work for, when he talks about Enneagram, he says it's the choices you've made in your life and the choices that were made for you in your life, right? And so it's hard to let those things go. It's hard to actually work through all of that. Like, I don't have a real fear-driven base in my life. Drives my wife crazy because I live a little better in chaos and figuring out new things than she's somewhere between a 5 and a 6. And so she likes her methods, and she's a librarian, right? Teacher protector, right? Of knowledge, and likes her systems and helps her. And it doesn't always help me that way. And so figuring out that I don't have a lot of fear, but I can hold on to that pain. And I think that's part of that 4, right? Is what's the truth here? What's the thing I'm trying to figure out and work through? And I honestly, lately, as I've been thinking about that kind of thing, I've been thinking about a conversation you and I had when we went to see U2 at the Sphere.
Gosh, how amazing was that?
Such a great show.
Have we done it? Coop, have we done an episode where we just talk about how we went to U2? I don't.
Where was that?
Oh
yeah. Sorry.
Coop
do
didn't get it.
you have like
You left him out. That's not good for relationships.
Sad noise.
I've got a
You left
scary
him out.
noise.
So relationship severing.
Sorry, Coop.
Yeah. Anyway, we were sitting at dinner before the show.
Yeah.
And I had a friend just pass away.
Yeah.
And to Daron's credit, I watched him lean in, and let me talk and work through some of that kind of stuff. And so at the end of it, he goes, it's taken everything inside of me to really know that I need to lean into letting you talk through that pain. Because as an Enneagram 7, I want to run from it. And I don't want to think about it, and I don't want to talk about it. And like in that moment, like I know the skag we're going to talk about in a minute, but like I felt really seen in that. And because of working through a pain that I was working through, for somebody to then recognize that and allow for it, right, is really, really impactful to anybody, but especially to a 4, right? Yeah. And so in that, for me, like no question, the biggest thing, the biggest barrier that I deal with in relationships is pain.
Okay.
Am I going to get burned? Am I going to get hurt? Am I going to hurt someone else and they're going to walk away, which is ultimately going to hurt me? Like, you name it.
Yeah.
Really easy to go there.
Jules?
I think I hate this. Like, I don't like thinking this because I know it's so true, and I think I'm answering this the way you want it to, but I would definitely say that defensiveness is my first relational weakness. And I'm sitting here processing that it for sure comes out of self-protecting pain. I tend to, if I feel a relational threat, I quickly become, I'm very slow to stop to try to understand where they're coming from. And I'm very quick to defend where I'm coming from. And I think that is something I'm growing in. As a matter of fact, I had lunch with like a really good friend on Friday, and she's kind of working through the same thing. And she was talking about this quote, or this, like, not quote, but like this perspective of like realizing who you can be for someone is how you respond to them when they don't respond the way you want them to. And like, if you can maintain your response and you can stay like at a Christ-like level, then the chance of the relationship being the kind of relationship it needs to be, it will become that. And how much of a maturing is that? And she's about 10 years younger than me. And as I'm sitting there, I'm realizing like, oh yeah, like I was like at a 0 10 years ago, like a 0. And I'm now maybe at like a 3 or 4. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm still like, but I realized that I have a lot of natural, from childhood wounds, I think I have a lot of natural self-protection. There's a lot of depth to this, but like I've always kind of felt like I was on my own little personal island just because of some like life things that happened to me. They were decided for me. I did not decide them. And I then self-chose to put myself on an island where therefore I'm constantly putting barricades around it because I don't want any of the emotional pain to be, I don't want to think about it. And I feel all the time. I'm feeling everything, whatever. I don't like to cry, but I will feel and process emotion all of the time. But even when you process, just because you don't necessarily like to feel or you don't necessarily like to process the emotion, it doesn't mean the pain's not there.
Yeah. It's still having an effect.
It's still having an effect on you.
Yeah.
So like, even though I even think about the emotion or I'll work through the emotion and maybe even recognize the pain, like, it's like I still barricade myself from it because nobody really wants it. So I do find that, unfortunately, like saying it out loud right now, is that my initial instinct is defensive, even if the person's not done anything, even if I perceive distance, like I perceive distance, they have not shown distance, I perceive distance, or I perceive like a lack of like, connection or whatever, then I can see myself automatically being like, well, what's wrong with them? And that is not at all Christ-like and not at all real, because once again, I'm not meeting them where they are. I'm expecting them to only meet me where I'm at, and that is not how relationships work.
Yeah. Thank you guys both for sharing that. I know that's not easy, right? And, the thing I wrote down, Jules, as my extra note was that defensiveness, right, is perceived protection.
Yeah.
Like something's happening, I got to protect. The reality is it's isolation.
Yeah, very much so.
And like what you guys just unpacked, and and same things in my life, is it wasn't like we just started doing this last month.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? Like this has been the way I've been learning to do relationships since I was born.
Yeah.
Completely, most of the time, unconscious. And Julie and I joke about this. And we try to work really hard on getting as emotionally and physically and spiritually healthy as we can. And I feel like the healthier you get, for one, I think you realize how much more you have to grow. But then sometimes it gets tough because then you're in the world and you're going, you realize how many people aren't even curious.
Yeah.
Right? Like, well, I'm not sure what this is, so I'll just work more. I'll just spend more. I'll just drink more. I'll just eat more. Like, I'll do whatever I can to not really deal with this, so then I'm building these barriers, which are built on the foundation of these illusions where that's why we have to come back and say, what's the first commandment? You know what? I need to love God with all my heart, soul, mind, strength. Which really means understanding what the word says. He loved us first. So now as a human being, I'm in a place where I got all this sour in my life, but I can actually start from understanding that in the midst of with as sour as it is, as much pain as there is, as defensive, as arrogant as I am, whatever, I am completely and totally loved, accepted, forgiven, on the path of with a God who wants to restore, who wants to heal, who wants to walk me into that, and to stop at that place and go, okay, I got to get real clear on what that is so I can start moving into this and bringing sweetness to it. So I want us to go deeper, but I'm looking at our time. So what we're going to do is we're going to push pause in this conversation, and we're going to come back. And we're going to hit the skag principle, talk a little bit about this interaction with Jesus and the woman at the well, and I'll let the cat out of the bag. All right.
It was so funny.
It was terrible.
It was so funny though.
That I have the power to push the laugh button, so I did. Anyway,
Someone take
skag.
this away from
It stands
me.
for this: see, know, affirm, and give. See, know, affirm, and give. And this was brought into my life actually just back in December. And as it was being taught to me, like you have those moments where you go, like, that's good. Then you have moments where you go, that's going to change my life forever. And as this was taught to me, it was like, like that's for me, what I'm realizing is that's my new purpose in life. And even deeper than that, what I think I'm beginning to realize is those 4 words and the realities of them is actually the core purpose of all of our lives if we're going to actually look like Jesus. And so we're going to come back. We're going to unpack that in the next episode. I got some homework for you. I've got a brand new favorite song. Okay. I'm going to give it to you. You want it?
Yes.
Julie already knows.
No,
it.
I do.
Okay. Here's your homework before you listen to the next episode. You need to go listen to Tim McGraw's new song, Hurt People.
It's goody.
It is freaking epic.
Okay.
And it will give you a little background music, if you will, to get ready for the next episode. And the concept of the song is basically this: hurt people, broken people, break people, wounded people, wound people, left people, leave people, right? He has all these cool little phrases, but the whole point of the song is, could we come to the point of allowing love to heal us so we can become hurt people, healing people, broken people, fixing people, wounded people, mending people? It is a beautifully written song. Take a listen to it in the next week and allow it to give you some inspiration to step into this skag principle as we come back next time with Julie, with PJ, with myself, right here on the Daron Early Wine podcast. And until we talk next week, these 3 things: God's for you. He's not against you. He's near you. He is not far away. And he's created you on purpose and for his purposes. Talk to you next time with the Daron Early Wine podcast.